Birthday ngayon. Very special times. Of course, happy birthday kay duly elected Vice President Leni Robredo. Yan. Presidential candidate. Si Angel Locsin lang din ba? I think meron din siyang birthday ngayon, no? And of course, advanced birthday naman dyan sa mommy natin, mommy Vanji. Yan. Mga ano yan eh. Mga Leo yan. Nako po, malakas ang mga mga yan, mga strong women. Yan. Kamusta kayo dyan? Happy birthday! Alam ko masaya yung mga iba dyan, yung mga supporters ng kung sino may birthday ngayon. At mukhang mamaya, no? Mukhang mamaya dyan sa Makapagal ba yan? Yung ba yung very expensive na road? Most expensive road in the world. Yun ba yun? Na may drag racing and all dati. Alala ko yung panahon namin, parang yun ang pinag-usapan. Just to make sure, alam ko na meron major, no? Hindi major blogger, pero major rally or event na magaganap dyan sa Makapagal, no? Pasay ba? Pasay? Pasay is pink? Ayan, tapatan daw yung numbers na lumabas sa Cebu, sa Pampanga, sa Pasig, yan. So, yan, hindi pa tayo nag-greet pala. Birthday greetings tayo kay duly elected Vice President Leni Robredo Leonor. Yan, talagang lion eh. Kamusta naman dyan, mga kakamping, kakamisko, kapakman, ka-antman, yan, ka-GMRC, kamusta kayo dyan? Tapos yung mga iba nagbubuli dyan sa amin, mga kalenlen, ka-bleng-blong, whatever. Okay, hindi natin papatulan yan, mabait tayo. Huwag tayo mag-ano dyan. Mahirap na, baka makancel tayo. So yan, kamusta kayo dyan? Nagpahinga na kayo. Parang radyo ang pagka-announce ko dito, medyo exaggerated. Kamusta kayo dyan? Yan. Good morning! Good weekend morning! Medyo mainit ang araw sa sobrang lakas ng lighting. Medyo na-darken tayo dito. The lighting balance equilibrium is not optimal. Yon! At of course, alam ko, my goodness, this must have been really, I would say, spiritually, psychologically revealing moments for a lot of our candidates. May mga iba dyan na mukhang nagbe-meltdown last week. Sana naman medyo move on na tayo sa press conference nung nangyari sa last weekend. Medyo move forward. Yung mga kailangan mag-GMRC na kayo dyan. At yung mga kailangan mag-apologize na kayo dyan. At yung iba naman, wag na tayo pumatol. Okay, move forward na tayo. 57th birthday na ba ni Ma'am Leni? Yun, no? Talagang alam ng mga supporters. Yan, medyo naka-Barcelona tayo. Alam ko, hindi gano'ng kaganda ng mga laro nila recently. At more Real Madrid naman talaga ako. Wag kayo magalit sa akin. But yun syempre nag-Barcelona tayo recently, might as well. Let's go Barcelona. Kamusta kayo dyan? Parang konti pa lang nag-tune in sa atin Nasaan ba yung mga iba dyan? Dapat mas marami tayo. Nagpapahinga na yung mga iba? Kasi weekend na. Ayan tayo. Akala ko pa naman na-miss nyo ako kahapon kasi hindi ako nagpakita. Siyempre, kailangan natin kumita kaya ibang trabahong inatupag natin. Alam mo naman, writings, mga few thousand words lang naman. Hindi ko pa naayos yung bibliography. Ayusin ko pa, may in-edit pa ako. May release din ako ng interview ko. Extensive interview with Defense Secretary Delphine Lorenzana. Pinag-usapan natin si Tatay Digong, Tatay Xi, Tatay Trump, South China Sea. Lahat yan, pinag-usapan natin. Uncle Biden, yan. Lahat yan. Lalabas yan soon, ha? Panoorin nyo. And by the way, yung interview na ginawa ko with the Ukrainian ambassador for GMA Network, pakicheck rin lumabas rin yan, isi-share ko mamaya, panoorin nyo rin yan Kasi medyo extensive yung discussion, maraming topic na pinag-usapan namin, and of course it was a quite a wrenching, difficult interview kasi yung pamilya mismo na ambassador, no, I mean they're very much affected by the ongoing war and of course the Russian aggression that we're seeing right now in Eastern Europe. So yon, ayan na. So marami tayong mga seryosong bagay na pinag-usapan dito. At today, medyo magdadrama ako ng konti. Huwag kayo magalit sa akin. May mga sasabihin akong medyo dramatic, medyo controversial. Alam niyo naman, yan talagang ano natin eh. Medyo controversial talaga tayo eh. At alam ko, marami na iinis sa akin kasi, you know, I mean, first of all, syempre, cute tayo. Talaga nangyari yan. Haters are gonna hate. Pangalawa, syempre, alam mo naman tayo, we are respectful and diplomatic, pero kung medyo sabla yung ginagawa, wala akong pake kung anong side ka, liberal ka, illiberal ka, authoritarian ka, talaga I'll call you out, no? So, minsan sa Twitter, lalong-lalo na dyan sa Twitter, maraming galit sa akin kasi I criticize both sides. You know, the other day, tag ko pa yung inatak at na-criticize ko yung pinagsusulat ng New York Times na yan, napaka-simplistic yung sinulat nila. Alam mo, nai-insult ako pag yung mga portrayal ng situation sa Pilipinas is because walang sense of memory ang mga Pilipino. Mga ganyan-ganyan, mga... You know what? As I said, people remember what happened in the past, but they're also very disappointed with what happened after that past, meaning the dictatorship of Marcos. Kaya nga lang ngayon, they're, again, giving a second chance to the Marcoses and also it's not an issue of memory per se. It's also an issue of nostalgia, frustration with the current circumstances. It's much more complicated than that. There are issues of judicial impunity. Lahat yan, sinulat ko na nga yan. Tapos ganun pa rin yung mga analysis naman, yung mga liberal cliche na yan, nakakairita. Ayan, kinall out ko na yan. Oo, ako ganun ako. Tapos syempre, kinall out ko rin naman yung kabila na ina-attack si Vice President Leni Robredo na ang basyan naman ay napaka-ewan. Diba? I mean, of course, if you criticize a person, including birthday girl, you know, no? Kung may basyan, okay, pag-usapan natin. Pero alam mo yung mga ina-atake, in-insult si Leni, yung parang in-insult siya about her intellect, etc. Parang, wait lang. Sino ulit yung amo niyo? Ano ulit natapos niya? Ay, may tinapos pa ba siya? Sa dami pa naman ng pera. Baka dumaan lang dyan sa mga Oxbridge niya, hi hello lang, naki-party lang tayo dyan. Alam na this, mga rich kids people. Ayan tayo, na-atake si Leni. Kamusta? Unang-una, nag-graduate siya ng economics po. At sa UP School of Economics, one of the best, not only, well, the best in the country without a question, but one of the best in Asia. I mean, hello. Yung mga nag-graduate dyan, marami sa kanila pumupunta sa Ivy League schools, sa UC Berkeley, etc. Yung mga professor dyan, kausa naman dyan, Dean Fabelia, yan, yung mga iba naman dyan, kausa naman yung mga Jokno, yung mga dati natin prof dyan sa Econ, yun. Yan, talaga mga world-class mga yan, mga UPenn, Berkeley, mga ganyan ang level doon. So, hindi ka makapasa mag-graduate sa School of Econ kung medyo hindi mo naabot yung basic level, no? At abogado din siya. Of course, I think she retook the bar, etc. I mean, there are many reasons for someone not to pass on the first bar, but kamusta naman dyan? So, she's an economist by training from the best school in the country, she's a lawyer, etc. Tapos lalait-laitin nyo. Kamusta naman ang amo nyo? Ano nga lang, ano na? Ano yung ano niya? Ayan tayo. Tapos purong bastusan, ganan. Alam mo, iritang-irita ako sa mga ganito na junk food bloggers. I mean, the only reason they get traction is zero substance, 100% junk food. Right? It's like, kung burger, it's all like, unhealthy fats and carbs, pero wala talagang meat. No, konti lang yung tomato tapos yung ganon, yung pickles niya ganon. Pero bentang-benta kasi malasa nilagay ng yung mga flavoring dyan. Ayan, parang ganon yung level eh. Ganon ang level, talagang junk food, diba? Ibang klase ka. Tapos nakikiuso na yung iba. Nakikita ko dyan iba. October lang daw nagbukas ng page. Biglang 100,000 ng followers. Wow! Celebrity, sikat. Tapos pag panorin mo, puro mga ganun. Mga ka-unit team, ganito po ang tala ng gold. Mga ka-unit team, ganito po ang mangyayari sa atin. Maging Singapore po tayo. Mga ka-unit team, ito yung ginawa ng mga Dilawan sa atin. Kawawa tayo. Yan, ayan na. Tapos biglang 600, 700,000 views. Mga ganun. Ayan tayo eh. Kaya tayo hindi umaangat, kaya pinagtatawanan tayo ng ibang bansa. Kasi nga, ganyan niya ang level. Sana naman lume-level up tayo. At the same time, balikan natin si Leni. Balikan natin si Ma'am Leni. Happy birthday, Ma'am! Yun, no? Hindi talaga pumatol si Leni. Focus talaga. Eye on the ball. Katulad nga sinabi ko, yung mga iba nag-hate fest guys. Isko, mga ganun. It's not gonna help. Because Isko is not the kalaban here. Alam natin sino kalaban. Perfect attendance. Oxford man. Yun ang kalaban ng mga Leni supporters, di ba? Oo, di ba? Ako, analyst ako dito. Wala akong ano dyan. Ayan, atake nyo naman ako eh. Pero yun ang sinasabi natin, eye on the ball. At tingnan mo naman si Ma'am Leni, talagang focus siya. Tapos pinatulang pa yung sinabi niya, you're in the good place, yung mga ganun. Kay ano ba yan? Doon sa artista na DDS yata dati. Anyway, si K-Chu, mga ganun. Okay, huwag na tayo magmarites dyan. O, kamusta naman kay John, kaibigan natin John, si Sir Ogie Diaz. So, next time, mag-usap tayo dyan. Hindi tayo pag-usapan dyan. Tapos, yung iba, alam mo, kung hindi ka marunong mag-English, hindi ka familiar dun sa mga expressions sa English, wag kang maganda. Talagang yung level talaga. Ano ulit yung mga credentials ng vlogger nila? Travel vlogger dati yung isa, tapos yung isa, ayoko na magsalita. Sabi na naman, elitista tayo. Speaking of which, ito, kahapon papahinga na nga ako eh. Sabi ko, di ako meta ngayon. Biglang may nag-comment dyan sa post ko. Attack sa akin. Naka-ribbon pa siya na pink. Tapos New Yorker yung English niya, yabang. Tapos ang bastos ng walang yung bastos yan. Inattack tayo. Pinastos tayo. Tapos sabi, paid hack pa. Tapos kinumpara pa ako kay Thinking Pinoy. Ibang klase. Bakit ka mo? Dahil sinite ko ang surveys. So if I cite surveys and you don't agree with what I say or don't agree with the surveys, paid hack na agad. Tapos i-insultoin mo, ganun. Ay, ibang klase talaga. Bastos talaga yung mga ganun. Yan ang mga... I'm sorry to use this term, Ito hindi pink mga to eh. Ito yung mga dilawan talaga. And I don't mean it I mean it in a very specific sense. Ito yung mga mayabang, porkit medyo maganda yung English nila, medyo nasa abroad yung iba dyan. Tapos, anyone that doesn't follow what they think, atake nila. Either bobo daw, walang education, ganyan. I mean, yan ang mga mata pobre pa yung iba dyan. You know what? I mean, ito, natatawa ako dun sa iba na parang inata ko na, daw ako, dilawan daw ako, liberal. Let's say, pakabait ako, yung ginawa sa akin ng mga dilawan niyan, other year, grabe yung mga attack nila sa akin, Talagang bastos sila sa akin ng year niyan, I won't forget that. I won't forget what they did, I'm not talking about pink, Ibang pink. Pag-usapan natin ng pink very shortly, Very shortly, yan. Kaya nga sabi ko, Leni is not Dilawan. She's something way more than that. Many people who support Leni, they're not there for the Dilawan. They're critical, the Dilawan, etc. And again, I'm sorry if this sounds divisive or anything like that. But I have to be brutally honest about this issue. And yes, we can have a discussion about how do you define Dilawan and all. And you will get a sense of the definition. I'm not gonna go social science and abstract pa lang sasabihin ko na kaagad yan. Yung mga kakamping dyan, mga kaisko dyan, mga Ito, Grabe yung ginawa nila sila. Nag-Twitter fiesta sila. Kaya nga nung isang araw, na in-advise ko si Yorme Isko na huwag mo na patulan niya, is because I haven't experienced myself how they how this yung mga pawok na fake na yan, they went after me. Ito ha. Ito ha. Tingnan yung mga sinulat nila sa akin nung araw nila. Atak-atak yung mga dilawan niyan sa akin. Hey Darian, on petty, elitist, self-absorbed liberals. Ayan, tas may mga articles pa silang ganon. Tapos nag-hate fest sila sa akin. Grabe yun, alam nila yun. Alam, hanapin yun sa Twitter yun, yung ginawa nila sa akin. Yung mga self-righteous na yan, mga mayabang na yan. Ayan pala, sorry. Hindi pala Leo. Ayan, sorry, correction. Sabi ni Mommy. Taurus pala, Taurus. Sorry. Taurus pala yung iba dyan. Pasensya na. Yung astrology natin, medyo hindi pa ganun ka, ano. Basta tayo, Pisces tayo, mga mga mabait, mga sweet, mga romantiko. Yan. Yung mga ganun ng mga Pisces. Balikan ko tong issue na to. I know I'm talking and I'm very controversial. I know. But I have to do this. Kung hindi ko ilalabas to, hindi ko nilabas. Kailangan natin ilabas to. Kasi we have to talk about it. Because that 24% whatever supporting Leni, and the number could be 30%, 40%, who knows? It could be way higher later on. Hindi dilawan yan. Marami dyan, galit na rin din sa mga dilawan na yan, mga ganun na yan. Marami dyan, supporters din ni Kaliodi, supporters din ni Espirito, supporters din ni Kawalden Bello, supporters din ng mga progressive radical groups. Ito yung mga tao na kay Leni nila nakikita yung decisive break from a discredited past, from a dictatorial past, and from the more incompetent present. Talagang third way to the max squared, no? Talagang alternative squared. Yan ang mga sobrang supporters, not fanatic, but supporters, passionate, devoted supporters ni Leni. Hindi sila nandyan para ibalik ang mga, alam nyo na, diba? Yung ano na yan, yung mga ganun na yan. Alam niyo na yan. Okay. I'll talk about this. Alam ko medyo, this is not the time to do this. I know you can say that, but I think it's a time to do this. Because, you see, one thing I realized, magalit kayo sa akin. Sige, magalit kayo sa akin. O di magalit kayo sa akin. Bawal kayo dyan. Ito I'll be honest about this Sino tumatawag sa akin? Sorry, may tumatawag. Sino ba yan? May nakita yata sa baka may nagalit sa akin. Okay. Ito. Sana tayo, nasira yung train of thought natin, hindi naman. May notes naman tayo dito may notes tayo. Balikan natin to Okay, let me put it this way. Serious I have a very, how should I put it? I have a sense that there are some people there who did not learn anything from 2016 and not from 2019 at all. Parang, ito yung mga tao na super in denial mode, ibe-blame pa yung voters, at they don't understand the ground has shifted. They don't understand yung iPhone 1 nila hindi na gumagana. Matatalo sila ng Huawei kasi Huawei level 10 na ngayon. Xiaomi, matalo na sila ng Xiaomi. Hindi ito mga nag-level up ng software. At itong mga tao na yan, they're treating the past 6 years as some sort of a weird deviation from a supposed norm. And our idea is that, okay, we had reformist populism, we'll go back to reformist. Parang they look at history as cyclical. What they don't understand is that history is not always a pendulum. May kausap akong Aleman dati Hindi ko sabihin na ng organization, etc. Pero kaibigan ko yan. Sabi niya, the problem with some quote-unquote liberals is that they think politics is just a pendulum swimming back and forth. What they don't understand is sometimes one side got the guts, got the audacity, and sometimes very authoritarian. They'll put a nail, and then the pendulum doesn't swing back anymore. And that observation stuck with me. And I think there's some people there who have this very naive idea that 2016, 2019, okay, sige, ito na, wala, kay Duterte na Pero don't worry, magsiswing back din yan sa amin. Just like before, it's gonna be a cycle, etc. Well, guess what? No, that's not the case. And ito yung mga tao na hindi nakikinig unless isa ka sa kanila, usually rich people. At Kung hindi ka, ano, I'm really trying to I'm trying to be very diplomatic about this because I think this is a very important issue. Whatever happens in the elections next month, kailangan talaga ng matinong post-mortem analysis of what happened in 2016 and 2019. So we know what's going to happen to our country because there's no way to save democracy if the Democrats do not do their job of going back to the drawing board and doing the proper analysis. Yun, no? Talagang level. So balikan natin yan. So these are people who just treated the past as some sort of a freak weird accident, some sort of a deviation, and we're gonna all go back to the past. And all you need to do is recreate the past, no? So in the past, some woman was able to beat someone like that, we can do that again. Kaya na idaan yan sa radical love and all of that. I mean, bakit di kayo nag-aaral? Bakit di kayo nakikinig? Ang dami kong sinulat about how the ground is shifting. Diba last meeting class, napag-usapan natin ng interregnum, napag-usapan po natin ng median voter, di ba? Napag-usapan din natin, naalala niyo yung graph na pinakita sa inyo, na sobrang maliit yung blue, na ito yung mga fully committed sa liberal democracy. For sure, medyo kasama dyan yung mga dilawan natin kaibigan. And ang laki nung dilaw, na hindi dilawan. Ito yung mga skeptical or open to more authoritarian leadership. And then there's also quite a small gray on dito sa kabila. Ito yung tao na open to authoritarianism. And yun na nakikita kong base talaga, strong base talaga ni Bongbong or si Duterte, which is also around 10 to 15%. Which is exactly the number of Bongbong Marcos last year before elections. It was just like 13% or so. So ang labanan dito, yung dilaw na malaki sa gitna, na skeptical about democracy. Dahil nga sa daming kapalpakan, sa daming kakulangan, di ba? Dun sa realization of the promise of EDSA. And come on, seriously. When people went to EDSA Revolution 1986, what were they expecting after? They were expecting what? Social justice. Land reform, genuine land reform, protection ng mga karapatan ng mga manggagawa, a country that has serious industrial and trade policy, of course, I mean, not specifically in that language, but a country that can build manufacturing sector, bring in the investments, to make sure na yung mga basic services ay affordable sa mga tao, etc. And it's greater degree of egalitarianism and equality. What happened? I'm not going to put my finger on particular administration here and there. And as I said, on the record, I think President Aquino did a good job as a transitional leader, and God bless his soul. I think President Ramos did a good job of consolidating our democracy. Having said that, if you look at yung nangyari over the past 3 or 4 decades, no, we have not significantly improved the conditions of average Filipino people and the levels of concentration of wealth. No? So in 2013, 40 richest families in the Philippines took home 76% of newly created growth. So from out of 6% growth or so, what? 4% ay napunta sa 0.0000001% of population. It's insane. And then tignan mo yung Kongreso natin, tignan mo yung Senado natin. Ilan yung mga dynasties dyan? May mga nakita kong data na umabot na sa 90% kung sinama mo yung anak sa labas ng mga congressman at saka mga ano dyan. I mean, ibang klase, how is that a democracy? For heaven's sake, how is that an embodiment of the promise of the 1986 revolution? Kaya alam ko maraming frustrated dyan. But the question is, what do you do with that frustration? Do you jump back to the Marcoses? Or do you go for a Duterte? Or you fixed it, you improve it, you upgrade it. Diba? And I think those are the people who support Leni. Yung mga tao na sinasabi na 1986 revolution itself was not wrong. It's the implementation, operationalization of its greatest promises. Diyan tayo nagkapos. Kaya kailangan natin ayusin yan. Right? This is where it's different. Because the other side is saying, no. This revolution was a mistake. Kung andun pa si Marcos, di sana Singapore na tayo. See, very different thinking. And my sense is the Leni supporters, a lot of them want Leni to truly operationalize the progressive core spirit of the 1986 People Power Revolution. To make it sure that it was really a revolution. Not just some change of regime. Not just changing one elite for another elite. Not just a restoration of the old liberal oligarchy. Right? Yan po ang pinag-usapan natin ngayon. And at the same time, I want to be clear, I don't want to blame Ma'am Cory, and I'll talk about that more later on when we talk about 1986 snap elections. Um, she didn't control the military, ang daming coups. So really, 1986 to 1992 until Ramos came, sa sobrang gulo, it was very difficult for Cory to implement a lot of policies in the best way possible. At the same time, we cannot deny this was also a period of restoration of the liberal oligarchy in many ways. At the same time, if you look at the 1987 Constitution, ang daming kulang, ang daming loopholes, ang daming hindi inayos. For instance, yung sa dynasties, hinintay pa yung dynastic-dominated Congress to pass a law against itself, an enabling law against itself. So ano lang, motherhood statement lang yung anti-dynasty law? Right? Or yung idea na a president only needs a single term in 6 years, which I said is too long for a bad president, too short for a good president. I can go on and on about daming mga kulang dyan sa 1987 Constitution and all of that. But nonetheless, diba? Nonetheless, my point is it will be unfair to just blame. And not to mention yung issue ng debt. Marami tayong mga odious debt, questionable debt, mga Marcos crony debt na pinasa sa atin. We're talking about 24, 25, 26 billion dollars, depending on how you want to count it. A lot of that should have been canceled out. A lot of that we should have just slashed it, just like Argentina and Kirchner and all of that. These were illegal debt. Yung mga private sector na nag-invest, you deal with the cronies of a dictator, corrupt dictator, it's on you. Why should the Filipino people pay the taxes? Wala naman napunta sa atin eh. They should have been canceled. And kung ayaw maniwala sa akin, maniwala kayo dun sa prof ko at saka of course, long-time colleague sa GMA, si Ma'am Munsot, si Professor Munsot. She was the one pushing for the cancellation of a lot of those odious debt that we inherited from the Marcos era. But nonetheless, don't forget, the original sin is not Cory. The original sin is what became before Cory, which destroyed our institutions, created all of this debt, all of these problems, and not to mention, hindi naman talaga nawala yung mga yan. Bumalik din sila by 1991. They were back in force. 1992, Tanding Coangco and Imelda were already running for the presidency. If they put their numbers together, they could have even pulled off a victory because Ramos won by a very small margin. Alright? So it's a little bit more complicated than, blame this and that. Of course, see, I'm fair. Hindi ako yung shallow, simplistic ganon, right? So God bless the soul of Ma'am Cory. She did the best she could. She was not a politician by training. Hindi siya Ninoy Aquino, right? Ninoy Aquino perhaps should be the one, but wala, na-assassinate siya, diba? And then by the time that President Aquino, Benigno Aquino, Noynoy came to picture, he had to deal with the problems of the GMA era. That almost 10 years, and look at the levels of corruption and everything during that era. So wala na, so yung ability niya to deal with the problems from all the way 30 years back was limited. But again, my point is, nonetheless, I think we needed more than just gradual reformist approach. Ang kailangan talaga natin dyan is aggressive trade, industrial policy, aggressive land reform. And in this sense, I think aggressive is good. You know what? Because the oligarchs, the trapos, do not want good reforms. So the state has to be a strong state. The state has to push for these policies. Not strong man, bara-bara tatay style, but strong state. Yung agencies, yung secretaries, yung mga people on the ground, they have to do their jobs. That walang corruption, walang co-optation. They have to. So yun, at long term yung thinking. We wanted a democratic, strong republic. Yun po ang gusto natin in 1986 revolution. Of course, hindi pa ako pinanak noon. Just to be clear, wala ako dyan. Pero pinag-aralan natin yan. At doon sa mga nagsabi, wala ka naman dyan. Paano mo alam? Naku po, kung ganyan tayo mag-analyze, di wag natin pag-usapan ng panahon ng Espanyol. Panahon ng ano pag-usapan natin ng ancient history. Wala naman sa atin ng buhay noon. So mag-debate pa tayo ng mga Greek, mga ganyan. So, the Dilawan, quote-unquote, Dilawan, are not anyone. These are the people who are apologists for the shortcomings in the operationalization of the core promise of EDSA revolution. These are people that whenever you criticize anything about their preferred administration, hindi naman kasalanan yan, kasalanan ng mga ganyan, kasalanan ng voters yan, kasalanan ng Amerika yan, kasalanan ng China yan, kasalanan ng Russia yan. Ayan tayo eh. Ayan tayo. And these are people who do not learn. They're not learning. My goodness. Diba? Ilan survey ang pinakita ko, ilan data ang pinakita ko to show that the ground has shifted. The country is becoming more open to authoritarian leadership. The country is open and more desperate for a kind of a decisive leader who get things done. Di ba? Ito ang pinakita ko sa inyo. Hindi kasi sila nakikinig, mga kameta. Ito, tingnan mo ang liit ng mga blue sa Philippines. Ang liit ng blue. Ito yung mga committed sa democracy 100%. Categorical Democrats, let's call it. Unconditional Democrats. Look at how smaller numbers. This yellow, all of this, nako po, this is really the majority of your voters. So how do you win over them? These are skeptical people, and they're skeptical, and I cannot blame them that they're skeptical. Right? I cannot blame them. How many thousands na Filipino ay lumalabas sa bansa bawat araw dahil desperado sila or wala silang mahanap na deserving job and deserving na security of tenure and deserving public services and all. Naayos na ba yung Comelec, yung pressing fighter na nag-crash or something? Anyway, so, ito yung mga Dilawan who went after me. So, whenever I pointed out why Duterte won in 2016, whenever I pointed out anong kulang sa kanila, what do? They shoot the messenger. They attack me. When I dare to debate one of the big major blogger supporters of the president, so that the ordinary Filipinos can watch how ridiculous some of the arguments of this other side is, I dare to do that. They attack me. And they accuse me of being, gusto mo lang pasikat, ganun, parang, walang ya. Just because you're craven, just because you don't know how to debate, just because you're weak in terms of your argument, wala kang puso, wala kang conviction, don't drag me down. Okay? Don't drag me down. Alright. So, yan, mabait tayo dyan. Whew. So yan. Dapat out na yung mga yan. Ang in ngayon is ang away ng illiberal populism versus progressive reformism. Right? Ito po ang away ngayon. Illiberal authoritarian populism versus progressive reformism. Not just reformism, but progressive reformism. At kung titingnan niyo si Leni, parati ko sinasabi yan, pagdating kay duly elected Vice President, pagdating kay... Bakit pala gising si Ma'am? Mami, ba't gising nanay ko? Dapat maaga pa. Anyway, nag-train of that. Balikan natin. If you look at Leni, she doesn't come from the really ranks of Liberal Party. She was not a top figure within the former Liberal administration or Reformist administration. Galing siyang probinsya. Of course, widow siya ng one of the greatest statesmen this country has ever had. And I mean, who knows if Jesse Robredo, God bless his soul, if he were around, maybe he could have been the kind of liberal, democratic, decisive leader who could have turned the tide, no? Nonetheless, Leni has the legacy of Jesse Robredo. Leni has a Naga model behind her. Leni has 6 years of withstanding, of transcending, of navigating one of the most hostile political environments for any individual imaginable. Ako, vlogger lang. Grabe yung nangyari sa akin. Daming death threats, daming attacks, daming binabastos tayo. Tapos kung titignan ko naman yung profile, unang-una, either fake. Or kung hindi naman fake, parang, Kuya, tingin naman sa mirror bago mo akong lightin. Parang, excuse me, diba? Excuse me naman dyan, diba? Or yung mga nag-ano dyan, parang, ano ulit ang ano mo? But anyways, but na-stress ako. I mean, the past 6 years was extremely stressful. I didn't sign up for this. You know, I was a junior professor, assistant professor in university. I'm in media, I'm writing, academic, etc., etc. I didn't sign up for this, but you know, you have to do what you have to do. I mean, kung may conviction ka sa buhay, kung naniwala ka sa demokrasya, and you want an improvement of the situation, you have to stand your ground. Kahit ina-attack ka ng parehong side, which is exactly what happened to me, right? So, if you look at Leni, that was her strength. She was an outsider when she ran in 2016. Yes, of course, the Liberal Party machine was behind her. Yes, there was, the whole jazz, right? But I mean, she was really there fighting as a Robredo. And the Robredos were never core to the Liberal Party machinery. They were themselves beacons and bastions of progressive reform and leadership. Sa daming awards ni Jessie Robredo, sa daming awards ng Naga Model, si Vico nga di ba? Sabi ni na-idol niya talaga si Jessie Robredo at saka yung mga policies nilang, participatory budgeting, lahat ng mga projects nila dyan sa Naga. I came across academic studies by foreign students, international students studying nangyari sa Naga, the Naga Model. Ganon kaganda yung nangyari doon. So, that is supposed to be the governance model. So kung si Tatay Digong Exhibit A niya ang Davao, then Leni's Exhibit A should be actually Naga, right? The Naga model. Now, of course, we can talk about the scale, the issue that you cannot do what you did here, but we can talk about philosophy of governance. Of course, as we criticized also President Duterte in the past, you cannot just directly transpose what you did in Davao sa national level. Kaya sobrang palpak yung war on drugs niya. Kasi hindi ito Davao. Hindi mo kilala ang pulis. Hindi mo, gets mo? Kaya nung parang one-to-one correspondence implementation ginawa niya, ako palpak right to left. Nonetheless, philosophy of governance is what comes out when you're mayor for a long time, when you're a local government official. And then if you run for a national office, yung philosophy of governance mo, kinikerry mo sa Malacanang, no? So it's the philosophy of governance of the Naga model, the Robredo model that Leni always carried, right? As her really ace card. Yun talagang para sa akin, no? And for some reason, parang tingin ko, hindi na-emphasize masyado yan over the past few years. I just don't know why. It's a mystery to me. Hindi ako close sa mga staff ni Leni, etc. Hindi ko alam, right? I don't know what's going on inside. Probably, ayaw sa akin ng iba dyan. But hindi na natin pag-usapan yan. But she has a progressive team. She is progressive herself. She believes in radical departure from all the inefficiencies of previous administrations, whether this side or that side, right? And if you look at Leni, she's not only just a presidential candidate, no? Which is, of course, a big deal. Presidential candidacy is a big deal. But now she's almost a leader of a new movement. As in it's a whole new movement that far transcends the confines of Dilawan, apologia, and supine reformism, right? That came short of really embodying, operationalizing the fundamental principles of the 1986 revolution. This is what we're talking about. Oh, diyan pa pala kayo. Akala ko nagmo-monologue na ako. I'm just having my own moment here. Diyan pa pala kayo. But you get what I'm saying, right? You get what I'm saying here. Yes, there are, quote-unquote, some Dilawan, a lot of them supporting Leni. But the whole is bigger than the parts. Leni is far more than that. And Leni's supporters are far beyond that kind of base, right? And ang dami dyan, I mean, nakita ko isang video nung isang araw, kahapon lang yun, no? Na si Calyodi ay nandun sa isang komunidad at pumapasok si Calyodi. And then there are these supporters of Leni in pink going to Calyodi. I mean, almost like tears in their eyes. Calyodi! And they're going there, no? These people don't support Dilawan. These people support progressive reform. Radical reforms, land reforms. These are people who believe dun sa sa karapatan ng mga manggagawa, yung talagang kailangan ayusin yung fondasyon ng ating political system. So they love Calyodi, they love Leni, right? But not necessarily love, okay. You get what I'm saying? You get what I'm saying? So Leni is far more than just, that whole shtick, right? And she is. At yun ang gusto ko, pinoint out din ni Luke, ni Attorney Spirito, si Luke, nung nag-interview kami ng Project Pilipinas ng isang araw. Sabi niya, Leni is so lucky. At first, it sounds strange. Like, how can you be lucky? My goodness, binabash ka ng mga kung sino-sinong junk food blogger. Binabash ka ng mga flunkies. Binabash ka ng mga, respect my opinions. Right? Tapos threat, ganon. No, but ito yung sinabi ni, ni Attorney Lucas Perite. She now embodies the aspirations of millions, potentially tens of millions of Filipino who are tired of either this and that. They really want a radical departure and a progressive leap into the future so that the Philippines can be a true democracy, a mature democracy, so we can have a strong republic, so that we can progress economically, na hindi hawak ng ilang pamilya lamang yung kalahati ng ating economy, right? At yung country with dignity. Hindi tayo subservient sa Amerika, pero hindi rin tayo nagkakautaw sa China. Pinoprotektahan natin yung ating mga mangingisda dyan sa West Philippine Sea. Just basic dignity, for heaven's sake. That is what we don't have sometimes. When you have a president who jokes about us being a province of another country. It's a horrible joke. And some would say it's not even a joke, right? Which makes it even worse. Yan. Kalma tayo dyan. Kalma tayo dyan. So this is what I'm talking about. Leni is way more than sopa and reformism. And what Leni represents is this tens of millions of Filipinos, right? Potentially, of course, na-atakin tayo sa ano yan. Kasi, base sa surveys, 24% is like, okay. But she has at least more than 10 million support so far, right? Now, and some would say it could go up to 20, 30 minutes. Those people, they don't want to return to the past. Either the recent past or like yung past ng Talano past. Right? Voltes 5 past. No, they want to move forward towards future. Yun ang gusto nila. Sorry, medyo nadadala na ako sa aking Barcelona energy. Medyo nagli-Lionel Messi na tayo. Now, let's go to the future. Barcelona. Yun, no? But you get what I'm saying, right? You get what I'm saying? Ayan na, galit na. Kalma naman tayo dyan. But, let me put it this way. Make no mistake, this is the most important election in Philippine history, at least in the past 50 years or so. I would say, and this brings me to my next topic. Ang ganda ng transition natin. Smooth. At least since 1969 elections. Nung nanalo ng re-election, si McCoy, that election completely changed the trajectory of our country. Imagine if Marcos didn't win re-election, then there wouldn't have been martial law. Imagine if there were no martial law, then they wouldn't have been all of those divisive, dictatorial, some would say destructive. I mean, if that 1969 elections, hindi nanalo si McCoy, we would have been in a totally different trajectory. And kung hindi ka naniwala sa mga Talano, Malano, Antmano, ganon, you would say, we wouldn't be heaven, but probably would be at least Thailand level. Not below Vietnam level. Right? So that election in 1969 essentially set the tone for Philippine politics and the fate of Filipino people for the next 50 years. Half a century. Now, if Bongbong Marcos wins, then we're going to look at another potentially 50 years being defined by another Marcos. Then you're talking about a century of Macoyismo. That's what I call it. And should Leni or another candidate win, then I think she can also, or he can also, completely change the trajectory away from Tatay-style politics, but also away from the supine reformism of the past. That is why, ayan, balik tayo classroom dahil interregnum si Duterte, essentially up for grabs yung future ng the next two generations of the Filipino people. This election is not only about your ego and my ego. It's not only about your manok. It's not only about your kulay or my kulay or whatever, my gulay, whatever. This elections is about the fate of the Philippines for the next half a century. This is about the future of your children, of our children, of Gen Zs and the next generation. Kaya kayo dyan, mga Gen Z, mga ka-Gen Z, mga ka-Gen Z, ayusin natin, ha? Bumoto tayo ng responsable. Huwag tayo magpadala sa ano lang dyan, mga TikTok time, mga ganon. Kami mga millennials, we did our job in 2016. I showed the data. And I'm gonna post it later. We did the job. Hindi kami okay. In fact, millennials are one reason Leni won in 2016. A big reason why Leni won in 2016. It's very razor-thin margin pa yan, ha? Very close fight. But millennials are one reason why Leni won in 2016. Kaya dun sa mga matatanda, sorry to say it, na nagbe-millennial bashing and all, know your facts. Umayos kayo. Umayos kayo. Umayos kayo. Magbasa kayo. Check nyo yung exit poll ng SWS. You know what? Ilabas natin yan. Hindi, ilabas natin yan. Sige lang. Data tayo dito eh. Hindi tayo, dito. Ayan. Okay? Look at this. This is the exit polls. Tsaka ito. Okay. So, palakayin ko Ayan na. Okay. Ito. Okay. Ito yung exit poll ng mga bumoto ng 2016 elections. Okay? Yung gray, nakita nyo? This is 55 and older. Yung orange, kakulay ng notebook ko, this is 35 to 54. So Gen X yan nung 2016. And then yung blue, yan ang 18 to 34. Millennial and older Gen Z. And older millennials like me, obviously. Matanda na tayo. So this is from March to, this is December, January, February, March, etc. Now, kung titignan mo yung vote kay Marcos, for instance here, this is, by the way, not the exit poll. So sa exit poll, makikita niyo rin yung sinasabi ko. Tignan mo, yung vote base ni Marcos, pinakamaliit sa blue. Pinakamaliit sa blue. Ito yung millennials. Pinakamalaki, yung mga mas matatanda, 55 and older. At close, yung 35 to 54. Ay, walang ya. So, ibibilayin pa yung millennial. Ay, walang ya. Sabi niya, ang millennial, hindi kasi walang sense of history. Ayan na naman tayo. Data po, mag-aral po kayo. Yan ang problema. Lalaitin niyo yung kabila, pinagtatawanan yung mga lamano, antmano, talano, mga ganon. Tapos kayo mismo, hindi naman kayo nagbabasa. Ayan tayo eh. Ayan pinakamaliit, blue. Ayan blue, pinakamaliit. Ito yung vote base ni Marcos. Mas malaki yung 55 above. Ito yung mga, anak, kung andun ka nung panahon namin ng martial law, may disiplina, napakagandang lahat, kompletong pagkain, kompletong video okay. Wala pa naman video okay nun, pero you know what? It's imagination. Anyway, you can do whatever you want with your imagination. I-curate mo na yan. Nung panahon na yan, nirerespeto kami nga, even if that, yun yung time na nagsisimula, yung mga OFW phenomenon. Yung mga time na yan, number 2 tayo sa Asia, even if that's really actually in early 1960s, not in the 1970s, parang eye roll, di ba? Magbasa kayo. Mag-research kayo before embarrassing yourself and denigrating millennials. So millennials did their assignments, did their history. Many of us were not born, but we know the facts. We look at peer-reviewed studies. Hindi yung mga, ewan ko na dyan sa mga good Machiavellian, the professor, yung mga ganyan types. But high-quality, peer-reviewed journal article, kahit single, wala sa mga yan. Wala sa mga yan. Okay. Ayan. Very controversial tayo. Ang dami kong na-criticize today. Ayan, malapit na mag-12. So I'll have to wrap this up. Kasi pwede na mag-lunchtime na tayo. Respect for the time. Let's respect the time. That's time for lunch, for family, etc. So I don't want to keep you guys away. Now, if you look at it, 1986, ito yung snap elections natin, di ba? If you look at it, it's called snap elections for a reason because more or less, Cory had just a month to prepare to defeat Ferdinand Marcos. So the last time Ferdinand Marcos was on the ballot box, it took only a month or so for kalaban niya, in this case Cory, to mobilize enough support, 11th hour support even, to essentially pave the way for a revolution. Now, we're not looking at a revolution in the sense of 1986 revolution this year, but if Leni were to pull off an upset once again, and if she were to become the next president, she would be able to do something, nothing short of a revolution, if she truly implements a radically progressive reform package that truly benefits the average Filipinos. Takes care of ordinary Filipinos. At tayo, mga middle class, na mahirap din maging middle class. Diba? Grabe. Grabe. Yung buwis mo, 1/3 ng income mo minsan. Diba? So yun, I'll keep it there. I can say more, but I think I've said already enough controversial stuff. Sige, atake niyo ako, but if you just have a bit of reading comprehension and listening comprehension and a little bit of bothering to look at the data. See, I show data eh. Ayoko yung marites, chismisan, which is problem on both sides. Hindi nag-aaral eh. We need evidence-based political discourse. That is what we need. Right? At the same time, of course, exciting vloggers. Yan. Combination. We have to have both, di ba? Best of, alam na this. Alright? Salamat. Thank you very much. God bless. Thank you sa lahat sa inyo, sa mga stars nyo, sa support nyo. I really, really appreciate you. God bless. Thank you so much.